The popularity of paranormal tourism has grown over the years, and there are places in Canada that stand out in terms of the history and the number of reports. Today, we look at some of the most reported sightings in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. We'll include a first-hand account of a strange, unexplained sighting given to us by the man who actually witnessed the unusual event. An event that repeated itself exactly 20 years later, and I admit, we're stumped. Stick around for that one. Welcome to Wander, Explore, Repeat. Our world has so many things to see and do, and I'd like to show you some of them. I'm Daniel Jones, and I'll be your tour guide on today's adventure. Let's visit the beautiful Bras-d'Or Lakes for this first unusual series of encounters. The legend of the Phantom Canoe on Bras-d'Or Lake is one of Cape Breton's most enduring and mysterious tales. Though not as widely documented as other maritime ghost stories, it has circulated through local oral tradition for generations, particularly among communities along the lake's eastern shores. The Bras-d'Or Lakes, known to the Mi'kmaq as Pitupac, meaning long salt water, is a vast inland sea at the heart of Cape Breton Island, rich in cultural history and natural beauty. The earliest known reports of the Phantom Canoe date back to the late 19th century, when settlers in the Baddeck and Eskasoni areas began sharing accounts of a silent canoe gliding across the water, often at dusk or dawn. Witnesses described it as wooden and weathered, with no paddler aboard and no wake trailing behind it. Some even claimed to see faint figures seated inside, dressed in traditional Mi'kmaq or early colonial attire, though these apparitions would vanish upon closer inspection. One of the most famous sightings occurred in 1903, when a passenger steamer crew near New Campbellton reported seeing a canoe cross their path and then disappear into thin air. The captain, a man named Thomas McNeil, recorded the event in his personal log, noting the eerie silence and the impossibility of the canoe's speed and trajectory. Though the log was never published, excerpts were later referenced in local historical newsletters and community archives. The Mi'kmaq people have their own interpretation of the Phantom Canoe. In their oral tradition, such sightings are often seen as omens or spirit journeys, possibly representing ancestors traveling between worlds. The canoe, in this context, is not a ghost, but a spiritual vessel, a symbol of transition and reverence. This belief adds a layer of cultural depth to the mystery, suggesting that the phenomenon may be rooted in sacred storytelling rather than mere superstition. Despite its folkloric nature, the Phantom Canoe has made its way into a few publications. Sylva Donald Cameron, a noted Cape Breton author and yachtsman, referenced the legend in his book Wind, Whales, and Whiskey, describing the Bras-d'Or Lakes as a basin ringed by indigo hills laced with marble and alluding to the lake's mystical reputation. Though he didn't document the canoe directly, his poetic portrayal of the region helped preserve its aura of mystery. In 2011, the Bras-d'Or Lake Biosphere Reserve was officially designated by UNESCO, recognizing the lake's ecological and cultural significance. This designation sparked renewed interest in local legends, including the Phantom Canoe, which was briefly mentioned in a community-led storytelling project titled Spirit of the Lakes Speaks. The project aimed to collect and preserve Indigenous and settler narratives tied to the lake, though it remains unpublished in mainstream academic circles. Modern sightings continue to trickle in. In 2009, a group of kayakers near St. Andrew's Channel reported seeing a canoe that moved against the wind and vanished behind a rock outcrop. Their account was submitted to a local tourism blog but was never formally investigated. These contemporary reports suggest that the legend is far from forgotten and may still be unfolding. Whether a trick of the light, a mirage, or something more metaphysical, the Phantom Canoe of Brador Lake remains a captivating mystery. It blends Indigenous spirituality, maritime folklore, and the haunting beauty of Cape Breton's inland sea. And like the canoe itself, the story glides silently through time, unseen by most, unforgettable to a few. Our number 4 chilling folklore legend comes from the Cape Breton Highlands in the Margaree Valley region. The fog rolled in thick over the Margaree Valley, curling around the spruce trees like smoke from an unseen fire. Lachlan McIsaac had been walking for hours, his boots soaked through and his compass spinning uselessly. He wasn't lost, not exactly. He knew these woods, had hunted them since he was a boy, but something felt off. The trail markers were gone, the birds silent, and the air held a weight that pressed against his chest. He first saw the cabin just past a bend in the river, nestled between 2 ancient birches. It looked like it had been there for 100 years, cedar shingles weathered to silver, a crooked chimney puffing out lazy smoke, and a rocking chair swaying gently on the porch. A lantern glowed in the window. Lachlan hesitated. He hadn't seen any signs of life for miles, and yet here was a home, warm and waiting. He knocked once, twice, no answer. The door creaked open with a push, revealing a single room, tidy, quiet, and strangely timeless. A cast-iron stove radiated heat, and a kettle hissed softly. On the table sat a bowl of apples, fresh and red. Lachlan called out, but no one came. He should have left, but the warmth was too inviting. He sat by the fire, ate an apple, and drifted into sleep. When he woke, the cabin was gone. He was lying on damp moss, the sky above him pale with morning. No chimney, no porch, no apples, just trees and silence. Lachlan scrambled to his feet, heart pounding. He retraced steps, searched for footprints, for any sign of the cabin, but there was nothing. The birches were still there, but the space between them was empty. He returned to town shaken, unsure whether he'd dreamed the whole thing. Years passed. Lachlan told the story only once, to his cousin Ewan, who nodded solemnly and said, "You saw old Lachlan's place." The name chilled him. Lachlan McNeil had vanished in those woods a century ago, his cabin never found. Some said he'd gone mad, others that he'd crossed into the other world. Ewan believed the cabin still appeared to those who needed shelter, but only once. Lachlan never saw it again, though he searched every fall, hoping for fog and silence. Others claimed sightings, a trapper near Cheticamp, a hiker by Lake Ainslie, but the cabin always vanished by morning. No one could prove it existed. No photographs, no foundations, no maps, just stories passed from mouth to mouth like embers kept alive in the dark. And so the legend grew. The disappearing cabin became part of Cape Breton's folklore, a place between worlds, a shelter for the lost. Some say it's a memory made real, others a warning. But Lachlan knew what he'd seen. And sometimes, when the fog rolled in thick and the woods grew quiet, he'd stop and listen, hoping for the creak of a rocking chair, the hiss of a kettle, and the glow of a lantern in the trees. Our number 3 chilling Cape Breton folklore story also comes from the Highlands and the beautiful region of Inverness. The mist had a way of settling deep into the bones along the coast of Inverness, Cape Breton. It rolled in from the Gulf, thick and silver, swallowing sound and warping distance. Rory McNeil was used to it. He'd lived his entire life by the sea, his skin weathered by salt and wind, his boots cracked from coal dust and winters that came like judgment. But something in the air that evening made him uneasy. He had just passed the abandoned rail line when his headlights cut through a strange shimmer. At first, he thought it was smoke, curling low. Then the smoke gathered itself into shape, tall, canine, unmoving. The dog was black, so utterly devoid of light, it looked like a hole in the world. Rory stopped the truck, with his heart making a slow drumbeat against his ribs. The dog didn't flinch. It stood on the edge of the gravel road, staring as the mist twisted around it. Then, without a sound, it turned and vanished into the brush. For the rest of the drive home, Rory felt its presence behind him, not following, just known, like a story he didn't want to remember. He told no one, not even his cousin Ewan, who worked in the mines and believed in spirits stronger than steel. But 3 days later, a fire broke out in the southern shaft, an accident that claimed 2 lives and darkened the skies above Broad Cove. Rory lit a candle in St. Ninian's Church. He left a crust of bread at the crossroads near Lake Ainslie and whispered a line in Gaelic he'd learned from his grandmother but never fully understood. The old ways were stories, yes, but stories held power on this land. Some nights, when the fog presses close and the winds hush the branches, people say they feel it again. A low growl with no source, a shape in the periphery, the unmistakable weight of being watched. Not all of them believe it, but not all of them sleep easy either. Rory still drives that road, slower now, and he never drives it alone. Still ahead, a first-hand account of a strange sighting that happened twice, hundreds of kilometers and 20 years apart. We're still scratching our heads over that one. But first, we head to the beautiful and historical town of Baddeck, Nova Scotia, to talk about the Vanishing Lady, our number 2 folklore legend. In the quiet town of Baddeck, nestled along the shores of Cape Breton's Bras d'Or Lake, the fog rolls in like a whisper from the past. Locals say the mist carries secrets, one in particular that has haunted the town for over a century. It began in the late 1800s, when Baddeck was a bustling hub for sailors, traders, and curious travelers drawn by the promise of invention and the allure of the sea. Among them was a young man named Thomas Margaree, a schoolteacher with a fondness for evening walks along the waterfront. One autumn night, as the moon hung low and the fog crept over the lake, Thomas spotted a woman standing alone near the edge of the wharf. She wore a long grey cloak, her face partially hidden beneath a bonnet. Her posture was rigid, her gaze fixed on the water. Concerned, Thomas approached her. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked gently. She turned to him slowly, her eyes distant and sorrowful. "I'm waiting," she whispered. "He promised he'd return." Before Thomas could ask who she meant, a gust of wind swept through the fog, and she was gone. No footsteps, no splash, no trace. Shaken, Thomas reported the encounter to the local constable, who dismissed it as imagination. But Thomas wasn't the only one. Over the years, others claimed to see the same woman, always near the water, always in the fog, always vanishing without a sound. Some say she was the fiancée of a sailor lost at sea, doomed to wait forever. Others believe she was a victim of a shipwreck herself, her spirit tethered to the place where her life ended. A few even whisper that she was never real at all, just a manifestation of grief and longing that Baddeck itself conjured from the mist. To this day, when the fog rolls in thick and the lake grows quiet, some swear they see her silhouette on the wharf. And if you listen closely, you might hear the faint echo of her voice. He promised he'd return. We truly hope you're enjoying our travel series. Please like and subscribe, and consider becoming a member for early access to new videos and more. And now, our number 1 strange and unexplainable event from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. Though not exactly folklore, we were given this story by the actual person who witnessed the strange event. It was a warm summer evening in 1983, and I was driving alone along a quiet secondary road not far from Louisburg, Cape Breton. This was my sort of shortcut to avoid tourist traffic on the main road. It's a scenic detour carved between forest and ocean, familiar and peaceful, especially at twilight. The horizon hung in a soft gradient of amber and violet as the sun slid behind the trees, and the road ahead shimmered with the fading heat of the day. Normally, I'd turn at the usual intersection to head home, but something caught my eye, an unusual glow rising just above the treetops, about 200 meters farther along. At first, it was subtle, almost hidden by the soft light of dusk, but there was something otherworldly about the colors. Pale, electric blue, purple, hints of amber. It reminded me of a distant electrical fire. Intrigued and slightly uneasy, I continued forward rather than taking my usual turn, curiosity overriding habit. The glow seemed to be coming from a narrow clearing tucked behind a veil of trees on the forest side of the road. As I approached slowly, I rolled down my window to listen. The evening was deathly still. No passing cars, no birds, not even the rustle of wind. That's when I heard it. A low-frequency hum resonated gently beneath the silence, accompanied by a faint hissing sound. Then unexpectedly laughter. Two male voices, deep and relaxed, echoing faintly from the clearing. I was about to pass it off as a bonfire or campsite when I caught sight of it through the trees. A large, egg-shaped object perched silently in the clearing, roughly 15 feet tall, its surface sleek and white or very light gray. I couldn't determine if it was metallic, but I'll say it appeared that way. Around its midsection ran a band of small, glowing lights, blue and orange, though the fiery red of the western sky behind it made it hard to distinguish. The lights pulsed softly, like dim and bright rather than off and on. What struck me in hindsight was how much they resembled LEDs, which didn't exist in vehicle tech back in 1983. Then I heard one of the voices again, clearer this time, seemingly directed nowhere and everywhere. "You picked a great place for this jump." No response followed, just silence. I looked back over my left shoulder out the window, trying to see more as I passed the trees, but the view was obscured. I pulled ahead a bit, heart racing, then turned the car around in a slow three-point maneuver, planning to circle back. But twilight was fading into full darkness, and I couldn't reach across to roll down the passenger side window for a better view. My car was a 1977 Chev with manual crank windows. By the time I passed again, the glow was gone. The clearing looked empty. I arrived home about 20 minutes later. From the music playing on the radio and thinking of dinner, the memory of the sighting just faded away. Since I didn't know what it was I saw, I just forgot about it. Until 2003, exactly 20 years later. One late night in 2003, when I was living in Ottawa, I had the radio on in the background. The station playing was CFRA, and I was fading off. The syndicated show that was on was Coast to Coast AM, hosted by George Noory. I hadn't paid it much attention before, but that night something caught me mid-doze. A caller from Muskoka, Ontario, recounted a recent sighting. Lights in the trees near his cottage. A glowing, egg-shaped object around 15 feet high, surrounded by silent pulsing lights. Then he described hearing a voice. That was one hell of a jump. I opened my eyes widely, sat up, and I was starting to sweat coldly as my heart picked up the pace a bit. I hadn't thought about that night in 1983 in years, And yet here was another witness, hundreds of miles away, 2 decades later, describing not just the same object, but an eerily similar phrase. I felt paralyzed by the coincidence. I didn't know what to make of it, and I still don't. I've only shared this story with a few close friends, unsure how it would be received. But I'm sharing it here because maybe someone else has seen it now, that I know of 2 identical sightings 20 years apart. You just heard the first-hand account of this strange event, given to us exclusively by the actual witness. Please let us know in the comments if you've ever witnessed anything like this. The author would like to know if there are more than the 2 sightings reported. This is Daniel Jones, saying thank you for watching, and we'll see you on our next adventure on Wander, Explore, Repeat.